Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with day 2 of our conference, Culture is Medicine, Traditional Healers Summit. My name is Lillian Sparks Robinson. I will be serving as your MC once again for today's events. We want to welcome everyone back and ask that you find your seat. We're getting ready to get started, and as you're finding your seat, I'm going to ask Mr. John Eagleshield Jr., a traditional healer for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, to come on up to the podium. He's going to provide our opening prayer for this morning.
Hi. No. Oh, me that could be. Tokea you had Chante was stand up a choose up below. John Eagleshield Jr. Macha La Cocha Jake Wahik Brazil, let me alone. Chai, you was like the Mata Chai committee opening prayer machine Chaushi like she let ya Wahina Jelo. Jaya Tokea Jia Oloa Awahiank the law. There it huncha wa. Tatranka iota ke tra loa awahiank de lo. Well, I wanted to start with 2 songs that haven't been sung here in a long time. The first song I sang was a song Sitting Bull sang when the delegation of chiefs came. Then the last song I sang, he himself sang at the Capitol steps. So I wanted to share those with everyone here. So yeah, I wanna Hoi wank te lo chahe. Ushi maleo chahe. Matron kaisla wakatranka. Ra beti kile hoi wank ta chana makio tron kaisla ushi malao. Matron kaisla wakatranka mitaki homni. Yankapi na hito wishla na yu hawoki wichaki tron kaisla. Wa tron kaisla wakatranka dua yachi hata se woki wichaki tron kaisla wa ushi la yu hapalo. Wa tron kaisla wakatranka Oyate ki na haksi wa chini apelo. Na dohan oyate ki wa chini acha he oki ayo tronkashela na wa unshla uyu hapelo. Wa tronkashela wa katranka matako ni simatu wenishni. Oki wa chase macha wa pia wa chase macha he wa ushil mala yo tronkashela wa hik bezi lemi alo. Wa tronkashela wa katranka which only a mark wopla tranke chichi jalo trunkashila. Ampet wakana bet luta mark where wopla tranke chichi jalo trunkashila. Where trunkashila wakatranka ake hoye walo trunkashina maku below trunkashila, watch hekia and a wopila oloa awahia ink the lord. That trunkashila wakatranka namaku below ushimalo trunkashila. I tronkashla ke wopila tranke chechi chelo omayakea wopila tranka hechalo tronkashila. Na haksi wonshla yu hapalo na hoyate ki woke wichake tronkashila. Ushimaleo ushula po tronkashla home metake oase.
Thank you so much, John Eagle Shield Jr., for those beautiful songs, blessing us with your beautiful voice in our Lakota language and those prayers. It is now my honor to introduce our first speaker for today, Javier Becerra, Secretary here at the Department of Health and Human Services. Secretary Becerra is the 25th Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services and the first Latino to hold the office in the United States history. Throughout his career, the Secretary has made it his priority to ensure that Americans have access to the affordable health care they need to survive and thrive. From his early days as a legal advocate representing individuals with mental illness, to his role as the Attorney General for the state of California. Secretary Becerra served 12 terms in Congress as a member of the United States House of Representatives. During his tenure, he was the first Latino to serve as a member of the powerful Committee on Ways and Means. He served as chairman of his party's caucus and as the ranking member of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security and the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Becerra to the stage.
Good morning. Wow, it's too quiet. One more time. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Lillian, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for your service at HHS as our commissioner dealing with Native American affairs. Thank you for the work that you do. We very much appreciate it. I want to thank Giant Eagle Shield for his words, his prayers, for giving people an opportunity to feel some spiritual strength. And I hope that we all recognize how important it is for us to be able to communicate with each other in ways that used to move people and used to move nations. And too often that is forgotten. So thank you very much, John, for being part of this presentation. This is a pretty special occasion, not just for you, but for me as well. And let me celebrate it with you in what I think is the most appropriate way, by saying to you, me da mucho orgullo poder hablar con ustedes en dos idiomas. Mucho orgullo porque este era el idioma que usaban mis padres y mis abuelos, y poder comunicar con ellos es algo tremendo. En el idioma en que ellos se sentían cómodos, felices. Me da mucho orgullo poder hablarles en español, porque dice que tengo fuerza, la capacidad de hacer muchas cosas en maneras que muchos otros no pueden. Fuerza porque sé que hay mucha gente que se siente sin poder, pero cuando me escuchan en español, saben que estoy con ellos. That is the power of keeping your tradition. That, as I said, it gives me great pride that I can address you in two languages. That I can speak in the language that my parents and grandparents feel comfortable in. That I can speak in the language that sometimes those who are most vulnerable or who feel most powerless, when they hear you speak in their language, feel like you are with them. It is those strengths that we often forget. And in healthcare, it is the same thing. What is health? But the power to be able to keep you well and healed. And how best to heal? Isn't that left to those who have done that for time immortal and have done that for nations for the longest time, and who have the respect, but more importantly, the trust of the people who need to be healed? And so, for me, tradition speaks to our way of life. And what is more important than the knowledge and practice that comes from healing? And so what we are talking about today, and what you see us launching in this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and certainly here at HHS with our full team, is respecting tradition, recognizing how we heal, how we use knowledge and our way of life to move forward. And so I want to acknowledge all of you who have known this for the longest time, who have persevered and now get to see us in the federal government joining you to say, your way of life is healing and is deserving of our recognition. To our STAC members who I know who are here, and I'm going to get in trouble if I try to name them all, but Chairman Joseph, to you, to our members, Chairwoman Pinto, who is here, I know, to, I believe we have a number of the people who have made it possible for us to move forward over the time. I just saw Chairman Bill. All of those folks who have worked so hard to let tradition and way of life continue to be part of what strengthens you, I want to say thank you. That's what we're here to do as well. And perhaps rather than just say it, I hope you believe when we show it to you, because today the federal government is recognizing traditional ways of healing and health practices by making sure that for those who are under the Medicaid program or the CHIP program for kids, that you will get reimbursed as a healer for having provided that care to those individuals through the Medicaid program. That is the recognition of the federal government, that we recognize that health and healing come in so many ways, and it is up to us to ensure that the best ways, the ways that have been there for many in the past, for our parents and our grandparents, are recognized. Those aren't just words, those are real deeds, and as we know in this country, it's real money as well. And so to all of you who have worked hard for that, we want to recognize you for all you've done. Final point I want to make is something that probably many of you, I know my parents would have said this to me, my grandparents for sure as well. Sometimes it takes a little while to learn some of these lessons. And sometimes we look at what we're doing today, these new things in life that many of us never grew up with. Some of us still remember the days of landline phones where you couldn't walk around with them and do anything with them. You had to put a quarter in a phone booth to be able to make a phone call. All those things that are gone. Many things have never left. And so sometimes learning new things in the old ways benefits so many people. And I believe that today what we can tell you at the Department of Health and Human Service in the federal government under the Biden-Harris administration is we are learning new things from old ways. And we will bring them to us so that others will benefit as well. Not just those in Indian country, but hopefully throughout America, we will learn. Because it is good when you can communicate with people in so many different ways. It is good when you can show them ways to heal in so many different ways. And it is great when health comes from the practice of tradition. And so I am thrilled to be here with you to talk about how traditional practices of health and healing are now incorporated within the Department of Health and Human Services, just the way we are incorporating language, retention, and acquisition and preservation as an important part of making you a whole person. And so together we could make this happen. You are participating in a forum that took centuries in the making. You are participating in some history in making sure the federal government reimburses for what many of your ancestors have done for ages. And we are recognizing that to do things in this new world, sometimes you have to do them in the old traditional ways. Thank you for participating. Thank you for having the strength to persevere. And let us move forward and make sure every American can benefit from what you know. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I completely agree. We can do new things through our old ways. So we appreciate you coming out and sharing time with us this morning. It is now my honor to introduce our next speaker, the Deputy Undersecretary for Health, Veterans Health Administration at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Stephen Lieberman. In his role, Dr. Lieberman delivers executive oversight for all policies and programs within the Veterans Health Administration. Previously, Dr. Lieberman served as Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Health in the Department of Veterans Affairs, leading clinical policies and programs and helping guide VHA through the coronavirus pandemic. Prior to that role, as Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for Health for Access to Care, Dr. Lieberman provided executive leadership, strategic direction, and oversight for the transformation of veteran access to health care within VHA. He was responsible for operational policies regarding clinic management related to access, scheduling, consult management, and wait times. Please help me in welcoming Deputy Undersecretary Dr. Stephen Lieberman.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for that very nice introduction. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to join you today on the ancestral homeland, Nacotchtank and Piscataway people. All of this country is tribal land. First, I'd like to recognize the tribal leaders, tribal elders, Native veterans, and other tribal citizens gathered here today. And I'd also like to give special recognition to our tribal healers and tribal medicine people. You are very important voices in this room, leading us, the U.S. government, as our partners in our long overdue journey to acknowledge and understand traditional healing. I also want to recognize and thank the Department of Health and Human Services for hosting this very meaningful summit. At VA, we are proud of the work that several of our VA healthcare systems have already done to incorporate traditional healing practices into veterans' healthcare. These practices are available to all veterans at these locations and include sweat lodges, talking circles, and smudging ceremonies, among other sacred ceremonies. However, we still have a lot more work to do, a lot more listening to do, and a lot more collaboration with you and our government partners to offer these practices more broadly for the next 7 generations of Native veterans. I, as well as all my colleagues at the Veterans Health Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs, look forward to continuing in this important work. On the topic of collaboration, I need to ask for your help to continue to spread the word with your veteran friends and family about VA's Native veteran copayment exemption. Since implementing the exemption in April of 2023, more than 5,500 Native veterans have enrolled in the exemption, and nearly 250,000 VA copayments have been exempted or reimbursed, totaling over $4.4 million. While we are proud of this progress, there are approximately 97,000 Native veterans enrolled for health care in VA, so we have much more work to do here. Dr. Christy Prairie Chicken, who leads our Office of Tribal Health, along with other dedicated staff, including Travis Trueblood, who's here today, our deputy leader for our Office of Tribal Health, have put great effort into promoting and enrolling veterans in this copayment exemption and continue to do so. Please contact Christie's office at VHA's Office of Tribal Health at HHH.gov if you have any questions or need more information to help spread the word or apply the copayment exemption. I'm sure Mr. Trueblood, who's here today, who's sitting in the back of the room right now, would be happy to answer any questions and also assist you on this matter. In closing, it is an honor gathering with you today, and I look forward to our further discussions with advancing the next steps for traditional healing with our federal and tribal partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lieberman, for your remarks and for partnering with us on this event today. So we're going to get ready to go into our first panel for this morning. This panel will focus on medicine's many forms. It will be moderated by Dr. Karina Walters, who serves as the Director of the Tribal Health Research Office at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Walters will introduce our distinguished panelists, Mr. Ryan Wilson of the Native American Church of North America and Unchi Faith Spotted Eagle from Brave Heart Lodge. Let's all welcome them to the stage.
Halito sa hachifa hatapushi kan transport bitia hoyo mecha chata sia hoke mecha yokoke okla piscataway natochanka. Good morning, everybody. We're here to start a new day, and my name is Karina Walters. I'm director of the Tribal Health Research Office, and I'm an enrolled citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I have the distinguished honor and privilege of being here with Auntie and Uncle here to talk about traditional ceremonies, traditional health and healing practices outside of HHS systems and other issues that are really important to them. And they're such distinguished speakers that this is really going to be a dialogue and a chance for them to kind of conversate. I get the privilege of just asking a few questions, so I don't want to delay too much further. I just wanted to open with, as we're moving outside of the systems thinking of the services to back to the people and the grassroots thinking, one of the elders that told me before I took this job about a year and a half ago, I'm the director of the Tribal Health Research Office, and he said, when you move there, he said, keep in mind, he said, you guys get really comfortable in your echo chambers. And he said, don't get caught up in your echo chambers, please. He said, all the, real well-intentioned people, good workers, good Native people, good practitioners, all service professional people. He says, you all gather in these gatherings, and you all have these great conversations, and you all talk to each other, and then you pat yourselves on the back, and you walk away, and you think you've accomplished something, and you've talked to each other. But it's an echo chamber if it doesn't get to the grassroots people and the people who are poor and sick and suffering the most. So he said, don't ever forget that in anything you do, that we're here for the poor and the sick and the people who are suffering most in our communities. So I just wanted to, our theme is to get outside of services and into the communities today, and I can't think of two better speakers to be able to talk about some of these issues, get us out of our echo chambers. So please take a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your connection to ceremony and healing and health practices and anything else you would like to share. Yokoki? They're going to argue who goes first.
I didn't want to go first. I was elder up here, so I first of all, I wanted to say ho John for the song, and I think what he said was really interesting to me. And there's an old picture of our delegations that used to come here by train, and there's a picture of the Lakota delegation that was here, and the Sitting Bull was off to the side of that whole group, and I was looking at that one time, and I was asking him, what did you think about that? And he was saying he was not agreeing with what was going on. He was upset, and I think to me, our people, how they got out here back then, it was really a struggle to get here to advocate, and then here we are in a nice hall where we belong. And yesterday we had a group of folks up on Capitol Hill in the Senate Russell building to protect our Native American church, the Peyote Way of Life. And in this room here, they had the Dene Hatali Medicine Man Association from Navajo people come here too, just to listen in. And so I'm expressing this in a context that I'll draw back to, my background, but we're in a very challenging time over where we get medicine. We're in a very challenging time on how we train our young people, and how in this modern world, the discipline that it takes to actually be authorized to run these ceremonies. Our children and youth they love this way of life, but they're competing against a lot of other things. So I need you to understand, especially the federal representatives and people that are working here, we're at a crucial moment where the need is really high for healing and Indian doctoring and ceremonial support, but the people that are authorized, the authentic people that have those ways, are at almost a low point in our tribal communities. And this is part of the assimilation and the acculturation and the devastation of our ways. And so when we talk about this, I just go back to my background. I'm Oglala Lakota, and I want to say I'm Petawashtelo. Oya te kele wa mai ankapo, hokshina ya, wianke chonkata hanaj lo, la kowi chokanke te wahilana, blehe mechelo, and I'm here with a good speaker. I'm also the president of the National Alliance to Save Native Languages. But what I'm trying to get at here is our children and youth are saying they stand in the middle, cherishing this way of life too, but they don't know how. They don't always have ways to go. So this validation that Secretary Becerra talked about, it goes to something where at this crucial time, we're trying to make it where there's a pathway for these people to survive, to pay their bills, to be able to have food in their refrigerators and gas in their vehicles and the propane on and the lights on. And sometimes it just doesn't work in our true tribal communities at what you were saying, the grassroots level. So for me, I was raised spiritually in Arapaho culture and a ceremonial way of life in Wind River, Wyoming, even though I'm Oglala. And I get a lot of flack from that, from our people, Faye, and some of them I got to explain to them, you got to know your history too. We were allies with Cheyenne people, Lakota people, and Arapahoes. But my father was gone now, but he was one of the 4 old men for the tribe. And then our family is the Pipe family for the Arapahoes over at Ethity. So their whole thing was, at a very early time, they were being forced, and we're talking about this boarding schools, into making decisions if they were going to be Christians or if they're going to follow their traditional ways. And there's so many of them that follow their traditional ways, they were able to preserve their continuity. Very few communities in our tribal, across Indian country, can say that anymore. Very few of them have people that are authorized to take care of these sacred articles, these bundles, the things we use in our ceremonies. It's almost to find a tribe that's intact spiritually, it's really difficult. And there's a lot in the Southwest, in the Pueblos, and some out on Navajo, and then in the Northern Plains. So when I think of this, that's the background I bring. And I'm also a rabbit man with the Arapahoes. And there was Oliver Red Cloud. Late Oliver was one too. Other than that, there's no other Arapahoes that were in that society or had sponsored their ceremonies at that level. So when I come here, what I'm trying to really get across is some of us, we're looking at this in a way where, from our background, we're trying to figure out how it would work. We're also trying to figure out how do we not empower charlatans and people that are fringe, people that are trying to exploit this opportunity, and how do we do that? So at the local tribal level, that's really an important thing. But then you get into urban communities, you get into tribes that are not recognized by the federal government or don't have treaty rights. What are they going to do, and how are they going to do that? So for us, that's kind of how I'm thinking of my background, how it would fit in. And I wanted, Faye to say more than I'm saying here, but that's a little bit of my introduction. And I think too, why they started the Navajo Medicine Man Association was because their young people didn't have the interest in acquiring those protocols because it was so hard. It's so difficult. So they started that association to mentor young people and to bring them in and train them and to do that. And I think if I could impress upon you this, we talk about traditional healing, it's really who's going to heal people, and who's going to heal the Indian doctors and the medicine men, and who's going to take care of them. And to get somebody trained in a whole way forward where they can do that, it's a real community effort, it's a family effort, and it's that discipline. And I'm hoping that this initiative, this effort, it kind of inspires more people to look at that as something that they want, in their lives too. But that's a little bit of my background, and we'll have Faye, and then I'll say a little bit more, what we're thinking here.
Petty Washte, good day. You peer kera ke ya hippie, damn petuki ata iushke o knawahi. I've come with a good heart, and I am a grandmother. I'm a Kushi. I'm also part Titwa, so they say Unchi. And we have dialect differences that are so rich because our language is codified. And so I wish I could have time to share more of that, but I want to share one word that will make you think about the code when we code switch. Because when we go into the clinic, we have to code switch. When we come into your conferences, we code switch. But I'll give you an example of one of my beautiful daughter. I have 2 children. I had a son that is still in the spirit world, decided not to come. And I have 3 grandchildren, a 22-year-old, a 6-year-old who does my nails, and I have a 10-year-old. And so I want to share a word with you to kind of get you out of your cage. And it's wayuwi. So my daughter has a doctorate. She's a beloved child. In order for our children to do what you want them to do in your research studies, they have to be beloved. Many of our children have not experienced being beloved. If you want to read about beloved children, read Ella Deloria, Tui Ella Deloria. She talks about what it takes to make a beloved child, and it's never too late to do that. If you can call your spirit, you can start at 2, you can start at 3. But she decided as one of her doctoral studies, she was going to study sexuality among Native people. And Standing Rock came along, so of course I was called to Standing Rock as part of the tribal leadership, and she started asking, and she said, whoa, I don't think I'm going to do this one right now. There's a lot of drama in Native sexuality, so because of colonial abuse. But one of the questions she asked my aunt, who was 102 at that time, she died at 104 like my grandma did, but she went home and she said, Kushi, how do you say sex in our language? And my auntie said, Takoja, don't be talking like that. What are you asking about sex? And she said, I just want to learn how you said it. And so she kind of put her head down, thought for a while, and then she said, Wayuwi. And so what that means is, Wayuwi means to braid, to wind around. So symbolically, it would be like going like this. So you biologists in the room, what does that remind you of? DNA. Yes. So high school kids get it right away when I say that. But it was a symbolic representation of procreation, and it was deep. How did we know that? We didn't have microscopes, we didn't have the Western science, but we already knew. So wayuwi is how you braid with another person. And she said, don't make too many braids. Those braids are going to follow you. They'll be dangling around. So some wisdom there. But what I wanted to do is say that we do have to, I hear you say the word surrogate. So that's not a good word for me because surrogates have been harmful to me. So I need some explanation on that from somebody who has some power in your system. But I think that I want to shake your cage a little bit in thinking about if you ask us up here on how to guide you. So I want you know how you like to do surveys on us? So I'm going to do a little survey. How many of you are here because you had to come? Raise your hand. Don't be lying. Okay, you're the prisoners, right? So how many of you came because you really want to address the things that the secretary, it delighted me that he talked about tradition. How many of you came for that? Raise your hand. How many of you have no clue? Be honest now. I say that because one of the things that I've learned at standing on this hill of 76 years old and knowing the urgency of mentoring and sharing like I was with my hardcore aunties and my cushies, and they were pretty tough. I had to hop to it, and because they say that every person has 300 years of oral history. So we went way back in the learning that she definitely had a PhD in Odakota. But one of the things that I learned in working in these systems that the secretary talked about is they're very violent. There are systems of violence, and the worst one, the hardest one, are schools. Our schools are constructed to injure, public school, particularly because in Native culture, our schools were the societies. They were the natural Native governance systems that taught you what to do, how to behave, and what to do when you weren't behaving, because somebody else would intervene. So we need a lot of intervention on the ones that aren't behaving in our systems. And so how do we do that? So I want to give you an example of violent body language. Before I say that, one of the things, so I won't forget, is that what we have done in our society that it belonged to, which is a 30-year revived society, after years of experiencing colonial abuse that still exists in systems like healthcare and schools, is that we learned how to be stealth. We learned how to be, it's almost like the, not exactly, but it's like the art of war. You got to figure out how do you survive in this system. And the other thing that we realized is that after designing all of these beautiful things that we think are gonna, and some of them do work to a certain extent, but they're not our systems. At the bottom of it is reconnecting with the land, water, and culture that was deleted in colonialism, the eraser. That's the key, and I heard the secretary say that this morning in his language. I don't understand his language, but I could feel it. And I hope you can feel mine, but that's the key. So after 70-some years of struggling through those systems, because I started at 5 when I started to learn English, is I realized that over here is the government, and I said that yesterday. Over here is the, so this is deep, hardcore colonialism. It's still here. Over here is the neo-colonialism, the new neo-colonial. And a lot of people in our tribal governments were taught by the patriarchs. When they left, they carried on that patriarchal system. And over here is the grassroots. That's where I live. And I was taught to live there because my kunshi told me that I might not survive over here if I didn't stay connected to this. And so one of the first teachings that she gave me is, she said that I was, and this is like old kind of knowledge, she said that I was born with 2 of those swirls on the top of your head. You know how you have the part in the middle? Does anybody in here have 2 swirls on your head? Raise your hand. You do? Raise your hand. My brother.
Everybody's just half raising their hands. They need to...
So I have 2, and my kunshi said that all the tuis and the kushis gathered around, and they said, "Ma, wanka, dewi chinchanaki nina sapingta, daku wokok peke chungta." She's going to do something big and dangerous. So she has 2 spirits. She's got 2 brains, but she has a chekpa. What's a chekpa? A twin. So I have a twin, and I found her. All of the things that my kunshis told me that to look for, and she's a living chekpa. She lives in New York. She's from Oglala. I forgive her for that, but she's a very dear Oglala chekpa sister, and it is just absolutely crazy that our lives are identical. And I'm talking about her today, so watch, she's going to text me. She's going to let me know. But what we do is we live in the way of medicine is that it's dangerous because people are killing our land. I fear for the coming years. As I speak, I need to take it out. I have bitterroot in my mouth. My grandma had this in her mouth every single day. She lived to be 104. My Tui did this, natural medicine. These are being suffered by pesticides, so we have to look for special places to harvest bitterroot, because all the drainage, there are very few places where you can find bitterroot that is not contaminated by pesticides. So there are different ways and beings, but one of the things is the system of violence. And I worked for a CSAP program back in the day in the 90s, and it was a horrible experience for my own people because of the lateral violence from the patriarchy. But I learned something about body language, and I learned that before. But I'll give you an example. Some of you are head nodders, right? Those of you that are kind of interested in what I'm saying, I want you to nod your head. Okay? And I like that because I might be hitting on something that you're interested in. The majority of the people, and I saw this in my staff when the lateral violence in the sides, the alignment started, some of them would go like this, and I saw it a little bit ago. Some people will go. I don't know why I want to listen to this. And then my favorite ones are the eye rollers. It's like clear message, right? Oh, geez, I have to listen to this for 20 minutes? My favorite one is, I saw this when the honeymoon was over in this project, the CSAP program that I was recruited to be in. There was a person on this side of the room was doing those violent behaviors, and I saw them connect with the other one on the other side of the room. And you are going to identify this because this happens all the time. This one looked at that one and they went. And this one, bonding moment, goes. It's like, yeah, this is BS. Real loud and clear in just their eye movement. And I thought, oh, here we go. And so I see that. I was before a school not long ago, and I was doing this cultural competency, and I said what I just said to you. And the school board chairman, I didn't know he was in the room. He's kind of racist. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't. It wasn't me. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to have fun. And I didn't know he was the school board chairman. So I said, you did. I saw you. And he said, I didn't. And then the staff member, because he's got to watch his back, right? He's in a violent system. He said, give him a break. He's the chairman. And I said, oh, that's better yet. And so those are the kind of systems that we're working in. And I've experienced it all my life because we have really cool vision statements. Is your vision statement around here somewhere? But they don't match sometimes. So when I graduated, I dropped out because I thought I was all smart, and my dad made me work in a turkey plant. Never going to do that again. And I went back to school. It worked. And so I started working as a teacher. About 100 pounds ago, I was a basketball coach. I became a principal, and when I was counseling, I thought this job is nothing about counseling. In systems, they have one counselor for like 500 kids. And then you just do the scheduling and the paperwork. So the vision doesn't match that. So I went into another level. I went into different organizations, and the same thing, the vision did not match the money or the deficiency. They're not strength-based. So I kept going, and I thought, there's something wrong. I got to figure this out. I'm not reaching what I wanted to do and what my chiefs told me to do. And so I decided I was going to go into mental health. And I started working with the most miraculous program ever. It was called the Children's Hospitalization Program. And it was for kids who had been severely emotionally hurt. And some grew up in a closet. Some developed their own language because they were so severely injured. And those kids were amazing. There was only 2 Indian kids in there, but I thought, this is what is happening on the res. Our voices were taken. So we can't just sit there and do DSM. And then when I worked at the mental health center, another violent system, but I learned a lot. You can only chart for 50 minutes. Then you got to stop, even if they're breaking down. It's like session is over. So I devised curious ways where I could stealthily work the culture into the system. I always had to watch my back, and I had to have people who could watch my back. But that was my journey, and I see her moving her microphone over here, so I'll stop, and when we go into another one. I got side vision here.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that these systems do not work for us. So if you're going to work with us, you need an interpreter. We call it IESCA. Even the word IESCA has been made bad because it's people who are not like full blood or have a lot of blood, but IESCA is interpreter. If you come into my community, you need an interpreter. Don't come without one because you're going to hurt us. And that's why the PhD grandmas and grandpas are there. But I'll go into more if there's time.
Oh, yeah, there's still more time. Okay. Yeah. Actually, your comment about the importance of the vision matching to the grassroots experience, and quite often that doesn't happen. One of the issues that we have in Indian country is, and you're talking about lateral violence and other kinds of issues, it's really critical that for us to have a healthful future, we have to imagine it. We have to be able to imagine what that really looks like. And so my next question for you is, for both of you is, how do traditional ceremonies, and healing and health practices, everyday health practices, how is that going to help propel us into a healthful future? What is that really going to look like for us? What do you imagine that to be? Because you outlined the colony and all that. So yeah. So what's that future?
Okay, did you guys all catch that? She was talking about body language, and then she said, Yeska, and she was motioning towards me. Did you guys see that? All right. Is this being filmed, or we're going to replay that? So that was,
Got a good heart.
So what I was thinking of as she was talking is the only way this works, and what the question, I think how I'm interpreting it is, these communities, and Faye was talking about stealth, and we've been covert because we had to be. We had to hide everything, and then we come about this time now where there's consultation, and we're trying to protect sacred sites, which requires us to reveal them. It requires us to communicate what's holy to us, what's sacred to us. We have to survey it, and that's that translation work too. But ultimately, we all used to live by spiritual laws of our tribe that Creator gave us. If the community doesn't believe in that anymore, they become myths and stories and fairy tales instead of what they believe. And my dad's tribe, people really get believing when their life's on the line, or if the doctor tells them there's no more we can do. All of a sudden, they believe pretty hardcore because Western medicine gave up on them, and this is all they have. So they're trying to figure out how to do that. But the communities have to get back to what's our traditional laws, our spiritual laws, and have a kinship amongst that where they respect each other. And that's where the wellness in the community is going to come. And that's really hard to create in today's world, but there's enclaves of it, and there's people in the room, that believe in that too. But we're talking about so many facets here. It's hard to do it in a few minutes. And what Faye was talking about too, I'll give you one example. What if they used this and partnered with a school where they do provide health services, especially our Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education funded schools? What if they have psychologists, but what if they retained one of our people to be into school every day, to work with kids, to cedar kids when they come into school, to pray with them if they need some help, to counsel them, to link them also. And then you go into our clinics and our hospitals too. Sometimes when someone's, they know their journey is getting ready to start, sometimes all they want is to have some cedar, to maybe smoke, and maybe a prayer, and that's something they want. So there's about 100 other examples that we could do to increase our community wellness and to increase how this traditional ways and this ceremonial ways can fit into where we're at. But I want to say something too, because I think Faye's going to round it up when I turn the mic over. We're up on Capitol Hill right now trying to protect a habitat that provides medicine for an entire ceremony. So when we were nearly wiped out, remember there was some estimate 100 million Native people here before contact. At the turn of the last century, it was down to 250,000. We were almost completely eviscerated. And two new ceremonies emerged from that desperation. One was the ghost dance, and one was peyote. Native American church is what they call it. They just put that church in there so they could do it legally. It's got nothing to do with church. It's a ceremony. But they hid and embedded their traditional ways into that ceremony because they couldn't do it out in the open. And everything's in there. Our pipe, Sundance, paints, everything's in there because they had to. That was part of the resilience and trying to overcome what was happening to us. But today, and you heard yesterday, officials from the White House make commitments to this. There's also a statute, a legislative vehicle back in '78 called the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. And the policy declaration says to preserve and protect American Indian ceremonies and religions. So there's a trust obligation to that too. So all of our medicine, like what Faye was talking about, this bitter root, it's hard to get, bear root, it's hard to get, even sage is hard to get in some places. All of our medicine is on private land in Texas where the peyote grows. It's the only place it grows wild in America. So for 3 years, we've been trying to get conservation easements down there for the non-Indian landowners to give them money just to protect their habitat. And this administration, who I support, can come here and say they advocate in this initiative, traditional healing, they support it. At the same time over here, billions of dollars spent on America, the Beautiful Executive Order, and all the conservation programs that non-Indians get. Non-Indians get. And they tell us we can't do that for peyote. They tell us it's too complicated to do a private-public tribal partnership off-reservation to protect sacred lands. And that's inexcusable, and it's unconscionable. And so we're still here trying, but I'm trying to explain we have battle sites, we have prayer sites, we have medicines, we have pipestone quarry. We have a lot to protect. And it's really getting hard because this world's getting smaller and these places are getting challenged everywhere in America that are holy to us. So I just wanted to say that little bit, and but we're not giving up, and this is really heartening, to be here. But I think that's what I wanted to share.
Okay. How much time do we have? I get
2 minutes.
Do I
But whatever amount of time you need.
You're
Auntie.
kidding.
No, go ahead. You say what you need
I
to
just
say.
wasted one.
Yeah, no. Say whatever you need. Say what you need to say. It's all good.
So I want to impress upon you that how dangerous our work is, because it affects our livelihood, it affects our schools, it affects our children. So when you come into our territory, don't be all esoteric, because you understand your system and you use words like POC, DSM, whatever, CHR, all those things. You come in all esoteric, and so just stop it. Just talk to us, because we have our esoteric language too, and it's a code. So I think the second thing I want to talk about is that my Kunshi's taught me that we all have a divine plan. So if you're required to be here or you came on your own, take some time to figure out what your divine plan is, because you invited us here. There's something that you are here for, but I can't figure that out for you. You can't come to my community and study me and help you figure it out. You got to figure it out before you come. And I'll give you an example, a fast example. Bear with me. There was a guy who came to OLC. See, we can do acronyms too. To Oglala Lakota College, and he was a white guy. And so and this was a while ago when you said our medicine army was very, very strong, and it still is. A lot of the young ones are learning. But anyway, this guy came and nobody really knew him and was checking him out, another white person co-opting or whatever. So anyway, they were having inipi, and some of the young guys said that one of the older Wa'apia Wichasha said, there's a white guy that has come, invite him to the inipi. So they brought him. He had no clue what was going on, and so they brought him. And so they continued to bring him, and he said the spirits wanted to have him come to make relationship. So it went over a number of years, and he got to figure out where his place was in our community. And the years went by, and they continued to grow older with this guy. And there came a time that he got sick. Some disease came on, and he was in a wheelchair. And so they brought him in, and he said that he wanted to explore who he was. And he found out that he came from Minnesota, and that he was near the massacre or the hanging of the Dakota 38. And so he discovered that his family came from there, and he wanted these guys that had become his bros in the Inipi circle to go with him. And so they went and they took him, and because he was going to pass on fairly soon, and I can't remember what he had. I think it was MS, but anyway, he found out that his great-great-grandfather had hidden some of the relatives from the Dakota 38 that escaped, and he kept them in his farmhouse basement. And the spirit said they wanted to thank him because the message was coming from the grandfather. That's beyond the capability of the DSM, right? And everybody know what the DSM is? Okay, I'll be esoteric, ask somebody else. But we had our own ways and our own ultimate deep understanding. So a debt was to be paid. So in your history, my son always says, Mom, don't be making people feel uncomfortable, but all of you are immigrants. And so when we get into a meeting, I always say, okay, immigrant history, where'd you come from? And then, everybody starts squirming, but the reality is that the majority are immigrants. But trace your history, because there are probably some connections of why you came here. Maybe you're doing what you experienced to get away from with your family history. So don't repeat it. But I feel like that sort of knowledge goes beyond, because why did our people know all of this? And then I lied, I got one more thing. So part of the getting out of the colony, I call the tribe the colony, the sub-colony, is that we try to learn about our land, and a lot of the addiction should really be connected with the outdoor, the land, the water, the raising of our own food. And so food sovereignty is big, but that's somebody else's word too. So we adapt that to survive. But I feel like if we can get reconnected and defend the land, then it speaks to us. We're going to be able to feed our people good, but the resources are so tiny. So if you want to do a group at the IHS, get gas cards, because a lot of these moms don't have cards. A lot of the dads don't figure out a way, because they'll say, we can't do that. We can't buy food. Well, bring the food yourself. We do that. Bring a pot of soup or something. That's kind of maybe out of your practice, but I feel like there's a lot of things that we have to do outside the colony. And what we did at Braveheart is that we realized that a lot of people have lost connection to the land. And there's a guy named Joe Delacruz from the Northwest. Anybody from the Northwest? You remember Joe Delacruz, how outrageous he was? He was a chairman, and he would always say, before you get all acting up as an Indian, get the damn data. And he'd say, do that first. And then the other one was Roger Jourdain from Red Lake. Do you remember him? Old timers. And I'll tell you a story about what they did to get their work done. But I figured out, get the damn data. So I looked at Village Earth. I have a whole team of young academics that are tied to the culture. I got 3 doctoral people working with our team in our small village. But I looked at Village Earth, and on the Yankton Sioux tribe, the white farmers have made billions of dollars off of our land. So the grandmas said, okay, we're not going to whine anymore. We're going to become leasers. So we went in there and we stole 4 leases from the white farmers that control our reservation. And they're talking about us. And they know our names. They frown at us when we go to the FHA office, when we sign our commodities report. We're getting farm welfare now. And we're stealing their leases. And those are really our land. But we have to go outside the tribe, because the tribe won't even let us get the agricultural resource management plan. We're the only leasers on the land, and they said it's confidential. And they're little boys and girls that don't even know how important that land is to addiction recovery. And so those are the kind of internal battles, but we do not take federal money because that's part of the colony. And so we do what we have to do on the outside, but we're always willing to be interpreters. But you got to ask. And don't be afraid to get gas cards and make the suit for the meeting, even though it's not in your budget. But so examine your divine plan. Like that young man in Minnesota, why are you here today? The Native people in the room, you're doing it because you have to fight. But yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Devin, do we have time for questions or no? How are we doing on time? We're okay? Okay, you can keep talking, Auntie.
Good. Well, I'd be interested in some questions, not from the prisoners, the explorers, or maybe the prisoners.
There's only 5 prisoners.
There's only 5 prisoners.
It's not us. It's not us.
Okay, go for it. We only have a few minutes. You're not in middle school. Raise your hand. Go ahead. I used to be a teacher, and the middle school was my favorite because they're the hazards.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just came in at 1 in the morning from California. I'm still a little bit woozy from that little piece of Indian country in northwestern California, southern Oregon. I'm Tolo Adeni. And I wanted to say I appreciated every comment the three of you have made. Every word has been a blessing. And I wanted our road brother in the center, Roadman, right? I wanted to say that you mentioned when things are missed or become unappreciated, they become mythologies or myths. But I wanted to just pivot and differentiate a little bit very respectfully that the mythologies are what keep us alive. Because those deep symbolic translations that come from the blood, from the ancient understandings of all of our traditional leaders, inspire us and unlock untold energies from thousands of generations of our ancestors about, like in my tribe, we have a phrase, we dat nai shri, that long line of ancestors going back to the very first people. All that wisdom, that love, that tenacity, that prayer, that we would come forward in our time and contribute to the world and to the healing and to the continuity of the people. I just wanted to say that possibly unwittingly, sometimes we demean the incredible efficacy, there's a fancy word, one of those colonial words, right? That power, that love, sometimes it gets a little bit sidestepped or kind of goes unrecognized in our discussions about these extremely important topics, but I appreciate and love everything you've shared so far. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that because it's kind of esoteric, but there are bridges that develop over the historical times, and I don't know how many of you have read Carl Jung. Carl Jung, raise your hand. He goes into mythology, and he makes some very important connections. So it's just a word. It's not even our word. So when in our tribal culture, we differentiate levels of shkan, energy, and awareness. So the biggest tool that we have is storytelling, which is what I'm doing right now, is that one is oyakapi. Those are events that actually happen, that somebody witnessed 5 years ago, or they're in the winter counts. Ohunkake are those awarenesses and stories when we could talk to the animals. That was when the animals felt like we were okay enough. We can't even talk to them anymore. And so that we differentiate even those levels. And then I'm going to tell one story and then I'll be quiet. But Roger Jordan and Joe Delacruz, this is how they were able to work through this system that's very violent. But they were all tribal sovereignty. And sovereignty means something different than from what you talk about up here. But they were trying to assert their own passports and their own right to travel, which is in the commerce laws, in the treaties that we signed. And so they were going to come without their passports, and they were stopped. And so being the people that they were, and Patty Marks, so I don't know if any of you know, she's with a law firm here in DC, but she's about my age, and we were laughing about this story, and I said, Patty, you need to get this video. But she said she got a call from Roger and Joe, and they said, you figure out how we can transfer $60,000. We need it now. We got to get home. So she said, I didn't ask questions. I just got it. And we bought a plane, and we got them into Red Lake. They flew in themselves to advocate that they had the right to travel, and they arrested the people who were going to arrest them because they were on tribal land. That's a kind of creative thinking that our people had to do during, and I think that was during the 90s, but we're being domesticated by all these regulations that make us afraid. So we have to figure out, how do we make relationship? How do we look at your divine plan? How are you connected to us, and why are you are here today? Long-winded, sorry.
I want to respond to that too, and I thank you for that comment. What she's saying also, relatives, is, and I'm in that generation too. When we heard these stories, we didn't doubt that they weren't real. To us, it was real. And I'm going to give you an example. And John was singing about protection of the Black Hills, that the Black Hills, it's how we came here to try to. A few years ago, there's some slick attorneys got together and decided to file plaintiffs to receive their individual share as members of the Sioux Nation for the sale of the Black Hills and the damage that was done in the Supreme Court and what was awarded. And we had tens of thousands Lakotas signed up as individuals to receive compensation as individuals for the Black Hills. And that's what I'm getting at, because any self-respected Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho would never sell that land. But as young people grow up, their kinship with the Black Hills was less and less, and their optimism for the return was less. And as individuals, they were making a decision to sell something or receive money for it that our people have protected for thousands of years. And this is what I'm getting at. And it goes back to our pilgrimages. It goes back to our protocols, why we do things in a certain order. And this is what's being challenged now. And that is the context I was using. It's almost like fairy tales to our kids. And that's we have to challenge that too. And we have to provide a context where it's real for them. Yeah. Oh, by the way, the lawsuit went on. It was in federal district court, and they ruled that it was the Oglalas. Since she's teasing Oglalas, us, of course, us Oglalas were the ones that saved that, and they ruled that these individuals had no standing at all. And that was a powerful ruling.
Pretty powerful. Give you an example of reconnection, because we can't even manage our own land anymore. So at Braveheart Society 30 years ago, we made a vow that we're going to reconnect to the land. So with these 4 leases, we're actually on the ground, in the dirt, and my son called this morning, and we're trying to get the Corps of Engineers to be friendly to beavers, right? Because they restore. So now we're having to face our own medicine. My son called on one of the tracks that we have. He said, Ina, he just called this morning, the beavers are out of control. They're cutting down all the trees. So now I got to figure out a plan. We're the managers. So.
Go get some mountain men.
Go get some Oglalas.
Do we have time for one more question? Yeah, we're getting signals that. Another question.
Hurry.
Don't be shy.
Did we scare you?
I'll offer something too before we go. Yesterday, Wheezy from Interior was over at our American Indian Religious Freedom Summit, and he posed a question. He says, how do we fund the American Indian Religious Freedom Act? And he was posing that question, and my rhetorical question, to use some of your esoteric language, but I said, Native languages, you're already funding this initiative for traditional healing, it's funding it. Native American Graves Protection, it's funding it. The Native American Arts and Crafts Act, it's funding it. What we're doing with this new STOP Act, the STOP Act is to prevent our sacred ceremonial items from going overseas and ending up in auctions. What hasn't happened is coalescing all of those under an office that would protect sacred sites too. And this co-management with federal land, everything we're doing now, I said, it's real. It's being funded. It needs more support, but it needs to be organized. It needs to be organized. And you're doing that. This is huge, what you guys are doing.
The bottom foundation of doing anything in Indian country is organizing. You can't just go in with your regulations. You have to learn the protocols and then the organizing. So if you want to organize those moms, maternal child health, you can't do it if you don't have them. And so the other part is examine your training that you get, because I did some training for the National Park Service out in Wyoming. They invited it part of co-management, and the grandmas are working with our treaty committee, and we're going to go after 3 co-management contracts. One we have in place, the other one's almost there with the National Park Service. We're doing all of that. But I think the very basic knowledge of what you say that might be culturally destructive. So really look at there's a lot of exciting young Native academics that have a different view of cultural competency, because you usually get the company training. But it's very, very basic. And I'll give you an example. When my daughter was in school, and I spent my whole life shepherding them, buffalo herding them through the school system. And she came home one day and she said, Ina, you need to go talk to my teacher. And I said, what'd she say? And she said, oh, she likes this visualization. She said, we're coming over on this boat and we're on this ship, and we're supposed to talk about how we feel about coming to this new land.
Nope.
And she said, wouldn't I be on the shore? And I said, yeah, you got it. And so I went up to the school and started in, and then about 3 months later, she said she did it again. I said, what'd she say? She said, oh, visualize you're in a Conestoga wagon going across the plains. And good for my daughter. She said, wouldn't I be circling those wagons? And so just using those examples of your verbiage, you know, it's because it's very privileged and it's class. So that's why you need a guide when you come into our country. So thank you.
You know, Faye, if there were oglalas on the shore, when the pilgrims, there'd be no
They wouldn't have
Thanksgiving,
made it.
you guys. You wouldn't.
Must be an oglala over there.
Yeah. Okay, question, yes.
How? I think I'm one of the last of the wagon burners. Back in anyway. You mentioned Iesca. I've always said, be careful of Iescas. They got our language wrong. They may speak our language, but they really don't know the language. And you can see that in the ways that they translated our names, it's totally wrong. Any kind of a thought process, they got that wrong too. And even today, we have language programs, and you may know the language, but you still don't know the meanings of it too. So be careful of Iescas.
If I could add to that, the original word of Wayu Iesca was interpreter. But when the immigrants came, they needed somebody to translate, so it became a bad word. So it was originally, the core word was just, because we, like with the Arapahoes, we may not have understood, so we had Wayu Iesca. So it got corrupted, and it came into policy, like John said, is that, so my grandmother's name was Judy Wee Deloria. And so I'm part of the Deloria family, and so when they started registering them, they said her son's name, my grandpa, was Spotted Eagle because he was the eagle catcher. So the agent was going to force him to stay with the name Deloria. And he said, no, I have been recognized by my people to be Spotted Eagle. And so that's why he retained the name Spotted Eagle, Wambadigadashka. So every single step in our life is a fight, every single step. We have to fight for our names. A lot of the young people are taking back their names from their ancestors, so it's a good time. But lots of history, we could go on about that all day, but thank you, John.
There's a lot of issues with language, modernization of our indigenous languages, where a lot of things are reshaping the thinking. And so I thank you, Mr. Eagleshield, for that. Okay, well, I just wanted to close with just a quick, a little brief story. An elder, there was years ago I was at a meeting, and there was a Alaska elder who was speaking, and this young woman got up and she said, "We've lost everything. We've lost language. We've lost this. We've lost land. We've lost this." She was on and on, lost. And that elder turned to her and she said to her, "My dear, you're the one who's lost. But as long as we have our waters, as long as we have the land, as long as we have ties to that land and the trees and that sky," and he goes, the spirit, the medicines, they're still there. And you have to shift your thinking. And so.
And you know what? Even the animals, the Wamakashka, the nature has humor. And I was talking to my Michinkshi, my son. I said, you got to learn more of the language. Keep at it, because they talk in our language. And so some of the uncles said, go out and listen to them, see if you can start understanding them. So he went out and he was listening, because our family would talk to, we have the name Redbird, so it was a family thing to be able to talk to the birds. So he went out there and he came back and he was kind of smiling and I said, what happened? And he said, the meadowlark said, ikadu jaja, ikadu jaja. That means wash yourself.
And let's end on that.
Good
Yuck,
humor,
okay.
good Indian humor.
Yuck, okay, thank you.
Okay, there we go. Thank you again to our panelists for sharing your stories, your wisdom, your knowledge. We always love listening to you and how you're able to incorporate your life experience while passing down incredible information. So our next panel will be okay, so Devin's asking for a 5-minute break. So if you need to take a 5-minute break, please go on ahead. As a reminder, the restrooms are back by the elevators here. If you leave the building, you will need your ID to come back. But we're asking for folks, if you don't need to take a break, stay put. We will have a Native Land and the Roots of Healing panel that will be coming up next. It's promising to be incredibly exciting, and then we'll transition into our lunch after that. But again, the restrooms are back by the elevators, and our panel will be starting shortly.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.